Now, the book of Psalms is referred to, or a good way of thinking about it, I guess you could say, is this is a collection of, how do I want to say this? It's pretty much a collection of songs. Okay. You can say songs and prayers. In other words, what we find in Psalms is Hebrew liturgy. Okay, of course spelled this wrong, sorry. This is liturgy. Now your book has this, really wordy definition of liturgy. Your book defines it as a body of ceremonial rites performed in public worship. Right, nice and wordy. The kind of definition that I want you to kind of remember, it's a little more simplified than that, is the form or custom of public worship. So we're talking about the form or custom of public worship. Right? As a religious community, Israel practices that religion communally, and because it's communal, it often takes a shape, it takes a form, right? This one thing happens, then this other thing happens, then this other thing happens, right? And what we find in the book of Psalms is a collection of these kind of communal songs, these communal prayers. So when we read these, a lot of times you'll see the first person pronoun, right? I, me, my, this kind of thing. But it's important to remember that these songs are sung and prayed by the community, okay? This isn't just, what you would hear in a pop song, one person just saying, oh, here's my life and I'm going to sing about it, right? These songs are meant to be liturgy. They're meant to be a form or custom of public worship. And that's really important for us to remember when we look at these, okay? And they're still used today. Let me bring up an example here within public worship in the Jewish community. So for example, here's Psalm 23 and it's being sung at a funeral, and I wanted to kind of give you a taste of what it means for these psalms to be liturgy and to be sung in public worship. Right? So you get this picture of how Israel is worshiping, right? So the Psalms give us this really interesting look into the worshiping liturgical life of Israel, right? But they don't just do that. What they also do is give us an insight into how Israel is responding to things, right? And this is really clearly demonstrated, in thinking about pop songs, we can kind of use that as an example, or just as songs in general. So for example, here's the song, right? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? So what song is this? Oh. What's that? Star Spangled Banner. Oh. What historical setting did this come out of? Good, right? War of 1776, right? Here we have. It's War of 1812?
Yeah. 1812.
Yeah. Well, it's coming out of a war, but a war for what?
Independence.
Weird energy. It's like he was Francis Scott Key.
I don't know.
Francis Scott Key was like he was in a British or somebody whose ship was he
It was a British ship, and he was looking out of bombardment of Baltimore. And he saw, because they were bombarding Baltimore after they retreated, the British, he saw that they had actually raised a bigger flag up, and that's when he wrote that song.
Gotcha.
Was it 1812 though?
Yeah, it was 1812.
So there's this
Rest my
whole,
case.
so there's this, but I think it's good though, because she's still setting it kind of in the same, that same kind of conflict, right? There's a historical background that once we know that, this makes a lot more sense, right? And there's parts of this song that like give kind of little clues to that historical background. Right, here's another one.
Broken bottles. That should be with
Who sings this? Anybody? You guys are old enough for this one.
MC.
Oh, Bloody Sunday, that's the,
Nobody?
Yeah, I don't know that one.
I'm only 20.
Some of you. This is you too. This is
Oh,
you too.
You too?
Yeah.
Leave that album.
You too.
I think that.
So this is you two. Where is you two from?
Ireland.
They're from Ireland. This song is about what's called the Troubles that happened in Ireland, which is this conflict between the Irish and the English, right? And this song is about that very tumultuous time, right? You read this and you're like, okay, we're talking about broken bottles under children's feet and bodies strewn across the street, right? This is not a peaceful time, right? So understanding the context of this song, understanding maybe where the author is from, these kinds of historical clues and clues within the song itself help us to place it in a certain time and give it a lot of meaning, right? Then there's other songs where it's much more difficult to look into the text itself, and say what the historical reference point might be. Right, so for example, most of us know that this song comes from, the time of slavery in the U.S., and this was sung by slaves in the South. But reading it on its own, it's much harder to just see that, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of clues within this about that kind of time,
Can
right?
we sing there?
No. Right, so let's look, for example, at Psalm 137. When do you think this song may have been written?
Exile.
Why do you say that? Which exile? The Assyrian or the Babylonian?
The first one.
The first one was...
No, I would think the second one.
The Syrians didn't exile anybody, did they?
The Assyrians exiled the northern kingdom.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
Or
that.
conquered the northern kingdom.
I knew they conquered it. I thought exile was like one specific thing.
Right. But this is the exile
Second.
of Judah, right?
Right.
Right. So by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung our harps, our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked us for mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. Right? We definitely see, knowing the history you know now, you can kind of place this historically, right? You know what context this song is coming out of, right? You know where the author is writing from, the allusion the author is making. Let's look at this one. What kind of references do we have here?
I think that kind of sounds like the people who remained during the exile,
Okay, why do you say remained?
The revenue?
because it says there's no one to bury them. So it's like they're there, they see the dead people.
Isn't their family
You were
responsible for
talking
burying
about
them
this,
too?
when they had servants that could only deal with the dead bodies. Nobody else could deal with the dead bodies.
Right, well, that was within one of the prophetic visions. Right. But yeah, this is, I mean,
But the
yeah,
nations is Babylon.
but again, we have this same kind of Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem, right? This isn't going to be the first destruction or the first exile because they kind of leave everything intact. This is the second one when they
Yeah.
come in and destroy the temple, right? They have defiled your holy temple. They have laid Jerusalem in ruin, right?
Giving the bodies to the birds.
Right. Exactly. All around the Jerusalem, there was no one to bury them. right? We can now read Psalm 79 and understand kind of the historical reference that's being pointed to here. Now, what's going to be important is if you look in your Bible, if you look through the Psalms, who do most of the Psalms say they are written by?
David.
David. Would David have written Psalm 79?
No.
No. Why then would the authors of Psalms say that David wrote these?
Because he was the majority. Technically, he wrote the majority.
Did he?
Mm-mm.
They don't know.
Because
They
he
gotta
said
put
it
it
was
on
gonna
there.
happen though, did he?
Who?
He said it was
No. Why would these Psalms be attributed to David? What's that? Huh?
Person who carried the coming on.
Yeah. Well, think about how important David is. Right? David's hugely important when we talk about Israel's history. Right? Everything is kind of leading up to the Davidic covenant. You have this very important relationship between God and David, and the text tells us in Samuel and Kings that David is musically proficient. Right? So there's already this history of this king being musically proficient in Israel's past. Right? And remember that for the Hebrew people, there is not this fear of, if we say this is written by David, but it's really not, that we're lying, right? And that this is, deceptive. This is, in a sense, attributing to this king who has such prominence in Israelite thought, who is stated as being musically proficient, enough to calm the raging lunatic Saul, right? These beautiful works of poetry, right? It is giving his name, it's saying these things are significant for our community, and by attributing them to David, we are in a sense putting a stamp of approval on these, right?
But this happened Babylon happened I don't know the year, but it had to been hundreds of years after David was dead.
Right. And so they don't have that kind of, that fear. Remember when we talked about mythology and this separation that we have between fiction and nonfiction that doesn't exist for the ancient Hebrew people, right? The same thing is kind of going on here, right? By attributing these to David, they know that, that David would not have been singing about the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians. But that's not going to keep them from saying, this is a song of David. Almost think of saying
Almost like it's a style of David.
Right, yeah, I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
The pneumo, is there any pneumo history in there with the saying that it's kind of David's or attributed to David?
I'm not sure if I would call it Numa history. The word is actually leaving me right now. Pseudonymous author?
Oh yeah, pseudonym.
Pseudonym,
Yeah.
right? Right. Attributing another author to a work, or attributing a person to a work. That's kind of what's going on here, right? The people know that these are not written by David, but saying this is a psalm of David. Think about it, a psalm of this tradition, right? This is in a sense, you are elevating this work by saying it is a psalm of David, right? You're giving it authority, right? You're giving it importance. You're saying this has validity for our community by saying it's a psalm of David, right? It receives this kind of stamp of approval by the community by saying this is a psalm of David. That David wouldn't have seen Jerusalem in ruins because of the Babylonian invasion isn't going to be this point of contention for the Hebrew mind. Okay? So it's kind of an important thing, because what you'll see time and again is you'll see a psalm of David when he was fleeing from Saul, or a psalm of David about Absalom, or things like that. And it's one of those things that we as a modern audience and as kind of historians and literary critics are going to need to take a step back and be like, is this potentially a psalm or some kind of liturgical prayer that, looking back, this little piece of history would have, in a sense, give us a situation and a context to kind of hold it, right? So think of, if we talk about, if we have a psalm where that is born out of Israel being pursued by nations, right? Or being like attacked by nations or threatened by nations. And there's a song about that, right? We could say this is a song of David when he was fleeing from Saul, right? Because that gives us like a context to couch it in and still give it this kind of stamp of approval and saying this is a song of David, right? Does that kind of make sense?
We're just like reading between the lines.
In a sense, so yeah, we have to take that step back, right, and realize that just saying it's a song of David when he's fleeing from Absalom is not necessarily the actual historical context that it came out of, but it may be serving a different purpose, right?
Now, would a lot of these be considered like metaphors or similes?
In a sense, there's a lot of, I mean, whenever you're dealing with songs and things like that, songs since the beginning of time have always been dealing in metaphors and things like that. So, trying to think if there's an example here in this one. Well, I mean, you have a simile right here, right? They have poured out their water or poured out their blood like water, right? They're not literally like have a jar of blood and pouring them out, right? But yeah, there's going to be a lot of that kind of metaphorical, symbolic language in there for sure. But like I said, a lot of these psalms operate a little bit more like swing low, where it's just really difficult for us to say, here's the historical reference point for this. I've tried to assign ones for your papers that there are some clear indications of historicity where you can kind of point to and say, here's some clues as to when this was written. But not all of them are like that.
Which ones are?
Huh? Just some of them.
Oh.
Yeah. No. You tried. Yeah. Okay. So here's this is kind of just a general introduction to what the Psalms are, right? This liturgy of ancient Israel that gives us an insight and a window into how the Israelites worshipped and kind of the ways that they responded to the crises of their time. Right? So I want to look now at some of the forms that we see in Hebrew poetry. Right? When we're talking about the Psalms, we're talking about poetry. So, the first big, I'm only really going to focus on two forms, and the first one's called parallelism. And this is all over the place, and there's 4 different types of parallelism that Hebrew poetry uses. Okay, and the first one's synonymous parallelism, right? A synonym are 2 words that mean the same thing, right? So synonymous parallelism is going to give us 2 things that are parallel, meaning about the same thing. So here's an example. This is Psalm 106. He, God, rebuked the Red Sea, and it became dry. He led them through the deep as through a desert. So he saved them from the hands of the foe and delivered them from the land of the enemy. Right? We see here 2 little sections that pretty much say the exact same thing. Right? Saying he rebuked the sea and it became dry and he led them through the deep as through a desert. Right? He saved them from the hand of the foe and delivered them from the land of the enemy. Right? These are kind of narrating the same thing 2 different ways. Right? There's this parallelism. And what parallelism can do, synonymous parallelism, is the second one, in a sense, helps give meaning and emphasis to the first. Right? Remember we talked about that kind of repetition with Hebrew poetry? Right? Do you like kiss or do you like kiss? Right? This is part of what's happening here, is that emphasis, that repetition gives it emphasis, but also it gives it further meaning. Right? He didn't just rebuke the Red Sea and it became dry and led them through the deepest through the desert. But that act was an act of salvation and deliverance. Right? You see how that synonymous parallelism reemphasizes, but also gives deeper meaning to the first one. Does that make sense? Cool. Another one is comparative parallelism. Right? As the Father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. All right, Psalm 103, verse 13. Now, comparative parallelism, what's going on here is this second one, as this, so this, is it's giving clarity to the one that's less clear, right? So for example, we know what it looks like for a father to show compassion to his children, right? That's something that people experience, right? That's within our experiential realm. The Lord showing compassion to those who fear him, that's in the more kind of spiritual realm, right? This isn't something that people like experience as clearly as they experience fathers showing compassion, right? So it sets up this kind of parallel, right? It's also interesting because note that one thing this does too is it says, okay, well maybe we can make this kind of connection, right? Not just clarifying, okay, God shows compassion, like a father shows compassion, got it. But we're also getting this connection of Father and Lord and children and those who fear him, right? So those kinds of connections get made with parallelism. Then we have antithetical parallelism, right? For you save a humble people, but the haughty eyes you bring down. Right? So we have the difference between saving and bringing down. And we can see that these are antithetical because humble is the opposite of haughty. Right? Doing one thing to this kind of people, remember the whole, like, there's two kinds of people in the world? This is what's kind of going on here. Right? You save a humble people, but the haughty eyes you bring down. Right? And this works within another kind of Hebrew poetic form. And it's called chiasm. And what chiasm is, chi is the Greek letter that looks like this. Right? Notice kind of what's going on here. For you save a humble people, but the haughty you bring down. Right? You see that kind of shape that the passage has? You save the humble, but the haughty you bring down. Right? This kind of structure is all over the place in Psalms. Right? It's also all over the place in a lot of prophetic writing. If any of you guys kind of came across that in your research, when you're looking at the forms that were in the prophetic writings, chiasm is all over the place in Hebrew writings. Right? It's a form that's used over and over again. Typically, what happens with chiasm is that whatever's right here in the middle is the emphasis. So what's in the middle of a chiasm, it's almost like what it's pointing to is what is emphasized. Right? So sometimes you'll get some of these that are 5 or 6 lines long, and some of them are huge, right? But whatever kind of ends up right there in the middle is really what the author is trying to focus your attention on. Think about it as that, as like focusing, right? If any of you have like went to a huge high school and when class got out, you know, you have like 500 people trying to get through 2 doors, right? That's, you know, that kind of focusing, that's what the author's doing there. So that's antithetical. And the last one is synthetic parallelism. Let me get all this out of the way here. Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers, but their delight is the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. What's going on with this is that each time there's this kind of repetition, it further clarifies, right? To the point of having somewhat of a climax, right? So happy are those who do not follow the advice, right, of the wicked. Happy are those who do not take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers, right? We have this 3 repetition here, right? Following the advice, taking the path, sit in the seat. All of these things kind of mean about the same thing. Does that make sense? And we can also see how, in a sense, these kind of continue to build on one another, right? Think if you're following somebody's advice, okay, you know, I see what you say, I'm going to kind of go my way. but I'm kind of taking your advice within that. Taking the path, you're like thinking about following somebody, right? And finally, you've made your home with them, right? This kind of, it continues to build. And then we have the shift, but, right? Take their delight in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night, right? So this is synthetic parallelism, right? This building and then this shift. Okay. The other thing that I want to show you that happens really frequently in Hebrew poetry, and if you have your, who has a Bible with them?
I have it on my tablet.
Like one of the big ones. Yeah. Open that to Psalm 119 for me.
I think download the Bible app.
It's on.
Because your Bible app might not show you this, depending on the quality of your Bible app.
It's the same version. I don't know if I have the excerpts. Which one did you say those Psalms were?
Oh, okay, yours actually doesn't have it. Interesting.
What is it we're looking for?
I hope this. It's okay.
What
Let me
scripture
see,
did you say?
Let me see if yours has it.
You got Bible Gateway.
Okay, interesting. Some of these. Okay, interesting. I thought they would have it.
What's the scripture again?
Psalm 119.
Oh, the
Let me show you this fun little thing that Psalm 119 does. Some Bibles tell you that this is going on, others don't, I guess. Okay. Let me hold this. Who knows what an acrostic is?
Oh, that's like on that movie Zodiac. It's like code, right?
Okay.
Like a type of code.
Not necessarily. So this is an acrostic. If I can get this little ladybug to show us here. Okay, focus for me. Maybe? Wow, okay. I just want to focus. Text is right there. Wow, that might be as clear as it. Oh, there we go. No.
It's just clear.
Okay, sorry it's not super clear, but you'll still be able to see it. Psalm 119 is the longest psalm in the book, and it's a reflection on the importance of God's law, the importance of the Torah, the importance of instruction. And part of what's important in instruction is discipline, right? You have to be disciplined to be instruction. Speaking of discipline, Psalm 119. You notice something? Anybody notice anything interesting about what you see there with the first 8 verses? This is the first 8 verses here.
It makes the little V thing.
They're listed.
Okay, keep going. Keep thinking. I know this is in a whole different language.
Yeah, that's
So I'm just trying to get
I know.
learned this language.
You have to learn it. Just look at something that might stand
I
out.
was gonna say it looks the same.
What looks the same?
That little
Oh, it's
line.
not
yeah.
This line? What do you think?
Go down some.
Is it written from
I mean to your
left
left.
to right?
To my left?
And oh nothing. And then up.
I think it's
the
written.
list
Up.
of columns like.
There's a lot of that.
A lot of this letter?
It's written from right to left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but three of them. But the 3 of them. Well, those
No.
are 2.
It's formatted the same way. So.
I don't know if the X at the very first verse is significant, but maybe it's like they're trying to cross the 2. Is that where you're going with this?
Can you just tell us?
This is in Hebrew.
No.
Yeah, so that X is significant, right?
What is
So that's 1 through 8. Look at, so you have here this letter,
Yeah.
The X.
this letter.
Yeah.
Verse 9 starts with this backwards little letter here.
Oh yeah, same back.
Letter, same.
That's a new.
Letter, right?
Oh.
Is it like a rhyming?
Oh, I've seen that.
Is it
What
rhyming?
is it, Jackson?
No, like you know when you look in an actual like I almost said real Bible. Like our Bible, like in the Psalms, they have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. You know what I mean? You ever seen that?
This is going through the entire
Yeah.
alphabet in the Hebrew, starting each line with the next letter.
I've always
In the
wondered why
Hebrew
they
Bible.
did that. Because they do that in like our Bibles. Like,
Sometimes, yeah, they'll show you
I
that.
was like, why? Why do they do that?
Yeah.
Why is like, yeah.
So this is Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Dalet, pretty much A, B, G, D in a sense. And it's starting.
Oh, I have that.
Notice we have 8 verses. Look at this. We have 8 verses.
See, I told you you should have looked at mine.
Real quick, we have 8 verses. Oh, does it have it? Oh, nice. Oh, here we go. Yeah, let me show you this. Okay, so look at our little tablet here,
Yeah.
right? This is Psalm 119. I don't know why this thing will not be more clear. It's kind of frustrating.
Oh, yes, that's
Okay.
Right there.
See, it says Aleph. Then we go. It says Beth.
Oh,
We go. It says Gimel.
wait a minute, is that C?
It's G. Daleth.
Hebrew, okay.
Right? Hey. And it goes through the entire alphabet. It gives 8 verses. It gives 8 verses for each one of these.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Right? There's 8 verses that start with this letter. There's 8 verses that start with this letter. And so on through the entire alphabet.
My 8.
Huh?
Yeah.
Significance of A.
I would think they would have done 7.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's.
What? You don't know, Mr.
I know. Imagine that. There's something I don't know. Right? So,
Always got the answer.
I know I do.
You don't have the answer
Eighth
for it.
number, new beginning.
Not for this one.
Mr. Lee.
What? What's
Eighth
that?
number, new beginning. Eighth number, new beginning.
I mean, kind of.
That's weird.
There's a lot of kind of theology behind Hebrew numbers, and I'm not familiar with all of it.
But there is significance to it. There has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't just do each one 8 if there wasn't a significance to it.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys want to do research into this, I highly encourage it.
Go that 3 plus 4.
Are we gonna get
Yeah,
extra
3 plus
credit?
4.
And then start.
What's that,
Okay.
3?
I mean, if you would like to, find out what the significance of those 8 verses, I would say, don't just go to, JoeSchmoKnowsTheBible.com. But first you got it. So that's an acrostic, right? And this is used repeatedly. It's not just in Psalm 19. There are some psalms where this happens, and like your Bible won't tell you because there'll only be like a couple verses for each letter. But knowing that there's an acrostic, it's one way that Hebrew poetry is structured, right?
So,
Things
wait a
that-
minute, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So the acrostic is doing all the alphabet?
Yeah, the acrostic is A, B, C,
Okay.
D. Or it could be things, I mean, you could have an acrostic where it's, day by day,
Yeah, okay.
ate, very, right? That's an acrostic.
Okay.
Right. So these are some ways that we can identify Hebrew poetry, right? Hebrew poetry makes use of parallelism, it makes use of chiasms, it makes use of acrostics. It does not rhyme. It does not have rhythm. In the same sense that we would want it to have a kind of rhythm to it.
But they, all the Psalms, they know how to sing them.
Right. Well, if you think of just kind of children's poetry in the sense of, what's a pretty standard little,
Row your boat.
yeah, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 like this but a dream. Right. It's got a very definitive rhythm to it. Right. Hebrew poetry isn't going to have that as strongly. Yeah, it's an 8 or 4, whatever.
I'm talking about the 119.
Oh, those 8
That-
lines.
Would that 8 lines be something? I wonder if it's maybe.
No, I wouldn't say so. Not as far as rhythm goes. It's
not
not good. It's a good. No, we fixated on that 8.
Eight lines.
Of all the things we fixated on.
No,
So right. So no rhyme, no rhythm. in the book of Psalms. What we do have are these.